For, O Lord, you're beautiful. Our scripture today comes from John's Gospel, chapter 4. And I'll read the first, I know it doesn't say that, I think it's through 38. The Pharisees heard that Jesus was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John, although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. When the Lord learned of this, he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria, and he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar. Near the plot of the ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph, Jacob's well was there. And Jesus was tired as he was from his journey, sat down by the well. It was about the 6th hour. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into town to buy food, but the Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it was that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well, and drank from it himself, and did also his sons and flocks and herds?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give him will never be thirsty. Indeed, the water that I give will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." He told her, "Go call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man that you have now is not your husband. What you have said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus declared, "Believe me, woman, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth." The woman said, "I know a Messiah called Christ is coming. When he comes, he'll explain everything to us." Then Jesus declared, "I who speak to you am he." Just then the disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman, but no one asked, "What do you want?" or "Why are you talking with her?" Then leaving her water jar, the woman went back into town and said to the people, "Come and see the man who told me everything that I did. Could this be the Christ?" They came out of town and made their way toward him. Meanwhile his disciples urged him, "Rabbi, eat something." But he said to them, I have food to eat that you know nothing about." Then his disciples said to each other, "Could someone have brought him food?" "My food," said Jesus, "is to do the will of him who sent me and finish his work. Do not say 4 months more and then the harvest. I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest. Even now the reaper draws his wages. Even now he harvests the crop of eternal life, so the sower and the reaper may be glad together. Thus, the saying, one sows and another reaps, it is true. I sent you to reap what you have not worked for. Others have done the hard work, and you have reaped the benefits of their labor." Many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. He told them everything I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them. And he stayed 2 more days. Because of his words, many more became believers. This is the word of the Lord. It's a familiar story that many of us have heard. But as I look at this story, I count no less than 4 really challenging conversations that Jesus had. So as we begin today, I reflect on what it means to have a hard conversation, and I've had a couple in my years of ministry. I've had to sit with a family as they lost their 2-year-old to leukemia. I've had to look my 90-year-old mentor in the face, a Bible scholar, genius, published author, professor, and tell him I disagreed with him on something in the Bible. He told me quickly I was wrong, but I could believe whatever I wanted. But I think one of the hardest conversations I've ever had in my whole life, I was sitting at my house and the doorbell rang, and not just once, but it rang frantically, and my neighbor was at my door, a neighbor down the street, a woman who attended the ministries of the church where I served, and she was there, she was barefoot, her kids were there, she was clearly had been just crying, she was hysterical. She had a little one who was probably about 3 years old, and then probably a 7 or 8-year-old with her. She came pushing her way into the house, and she sat down on the couch, and all she could say in her hysteria was, "I didn't mean to throw the knife, I didn't mean to hit him." I mean, that's a big thing for a person to walk into your house saying in front of her children. And it turns out she'd gotten into a domestic dispute with her husband, which wasn't the first time. They weren't the healthiest of families. And in her response, whether it was defense or whether it was aggression, it depends on who you talk to, she threw a knife at her husband in front of her children. And it just barely grazed him. Now, that wasn't the hard part of the conversation. The hard part of the conversation was having to talk to her while she's sitting on my couch. That after we resolve this issue and find a safe place for her to go, that I also will have to call Child Protective Services. Because anytime a child is present to violence in the home, it's an automatic call for someone who's a mandatory reporter. So while she's sitting on my couch in my own home, with her children playing with the toys in my boys' bedroom, I had to talk with her through this process of what was going to happen, and then we made the call together. Sometimes we have really hard conversations, and the good news is she went through a lot. It wasn't an easy journey, but she continued to find hope in ministry in the church, and if anything, I think that our relationship was stronger because I was honest with her about what needed to happen. Because I walked with her through that process, even though it was hard, and my respect for her, and I think her respect for me, grew as we went through that process together. Hard is not impossible. It's just hard. And sometimes we do hard things, and hard conversations are probably the worst because they're awkward and there's an opportunity for miscommunication. But when we take the time to have that hard conversation, often it leads to transformation. You know, metal is made in a furnace. Sculptors chisel stones into masterpieces, and diamonds are created under pressure. Hard conversations are hard, but we can do hard things, and when we do them, we become more useful, more refined, and more beautiful. It leads to transformation. today's scripture, I see 4 really challenging conversations Jesus had just like this. The first, of course, was the breaking of the social norms. The hard conversation Thaddeus was having with his cousin when they were little. He was sitting there talking to her, and then all of a sudden she's just bawling. Jesus was at the well, and he dared to have a conversation not only with a woman, which would have been uncalled for at the time. A man, especially a single man, didn't have a conversation with another woman that was outside of his family. It just wasn't proper, and especially a woman of another culture, especially a Samaritan. The Samaritans and the Jews were not friends. In fact, the Samaritans were the descendants of a group who had intermarried in a time of exile, and then they had taken on other religious practices into their practice of worship of God. And so the Jews thought it was impure the way they worshiped Yahweh, and the Samaritans thought that they were right. And so they butted heads and they didn't get along. They were considered each other the enemy to their own faith and their own culture. But Jesus did something interesting. He looked at this woman that he wasn't supposed to talk to, and he didn't talk to her about what was hard or was different between them. He started his conversation by finding out what was in common. What was in common is they both were at the well. They both needed water. He brought it down to the very basic necessity of life. And he began his conversation with her around the water. Something so basic to the human experience, they could have a conversation, if about anything, it was the water at the well. He found the common denominator. When Josiah and I were first married, we would go out for walks with our dog. We had this big dog. It was an old English bulldog, so picture like a boxer and a pit bull had a baby. It was like a little bulldog, but taller. I mean, it was kind of a mean-looking dog, I'm not going to lie, but he was fantastically sweet. But we would go in the evenings, and we would walk the neighborhood of the midway of St. Paul and on University Avenue, and this dog became the common denominator between the people who were out at night. I wouldn't have gone and talked to the men at the halfway house or the rehab center on my own. But when I had the dog, we had something to talk about. I wouldn't have talked to the random people walking University Avenue at night, except that they stopped to pet our dog, and we could have a conversation. Winston became our common denominator. It enabled us to have hard conversations with people that we wouldn't normally talk with, but it opened up the door for us to have hard conversations, and as a result, transformation, because pretty soon the men at the halfway house who were out for their 11 o'clock smoke break knew us, and they waited for us, and they waited for our dog. And the people that we saw walking in the evening on University Avenue became familiar, and they knew who we were. Hard conversations are not impossible. But when we care enough to have them, we find transformation. Our community felt safer because we knew each other. Of course, after this, Jesus has another hard conversation with the woman at the well. He confronts her about her behavior. That's a hard conversation to have. She had 5 husbands, and what this really means is that she had 5 partners. She didn't physically marry any of them necessarily. But anytime you were in an intimate relationship, you were considered espoused to one another. And so this was Jesus' way of calling her out and saying, you're engaging in risky behavior. This isn't healthy for you. It's not healthy for your community. It's not healthy long term. He was confronting her about her reputation in the community that she served or that she lived in. Have you ever had to have a hard conversation with a family member? Or with a friend? I have. I certainly have. I recently had a conversation with a friend about her self-destructive behaviors, and she was just on this downward spiral. And it was hard to say, you know what, I don't think this is okay. I think you're confusing. where you're supposed to go with what you want to do. But we talked about it. And I think it was helpful because she knew that I cared enough to talk to her about it. I didn't just avoid it. I didn't just say it was okay. I didn't even just accept it for her. Because I took the time to have the hard conversation, eventually she came to this place, and I can't say it was because of me, but eventually she came to this place. And when she got to this better, healthier place, she came to me to talk to me about it. When we have hard conversations, sometimes it's really awkward, but it can lead to transformation. Then Jesus has probably the most awkward conversation. In fact, the Samaritan woman brings it up. This conversation about worshiping in Jerusalem versus worshiping on the mountain. This was the crux of their disagreement. Is where the center of their faith lied. Was it at the mount where Jacob's well was, or was it on the Temple Mount? Where was the Messiah going to return? They disagreed about some really core practices. And she brings it up and she says, what about that? I know you say this, but we say this, but someday the Messiah will come and who knows, he'll explain it all to us. In some ways, she's trying to dismiss the conversation between them. They'd already engaged in two difficult conversations. They'd already kind of started to develop a friendship or relationship, and she wanted to kind of brush away the elephant in the room, which was the Samaritan versus Jew difference. But what happens is, when she dares to have that hard conversation, Jesus confronts her with, I am the Messiah. He reveals himself to her in a profound statement. Sometimes we avoid conversations about religion because we don't want to get into it with people. Whether it's other Christians, or people of different faiths, or people in our own families, or across the pew. This week I had a lovely conversation with a young woman about faith. For hours we chatted about every kind of hard conversation, every hard kind of question that a person might have about heaven, and is it real, and what does it look like? How do we know that God is the real God? What about other religions and other faiths? What do you think about them? And does Jesus talk to them too? We had hard conversations. And as a pastor, maybe sometimes I get those, but I would venture to say that many of you, because you sit here so often on a Sunday morning, get them too. From friends and family members who dare to ask questions of faith. I would also venture to guess that many of you have those same questions and haven't dared to ask them. But I want to tell you that when you have hard conversations, it's not impossible, it's just hard. When we care enough to do it, we find transformation. Finally, Jesus returns, or his disciples return to him, and they question why he's talking to the Samaritan woman. It's hard conversation number 4. It's like when you go back to church and people start to wonder why you were doing this or doing that. Because they don't understand it. They don't understand your calling or what you've been doing or why Jesus would even dare to talk to a Samaritan. They were confronting him about his behavior. And it's hard when you get confronted about your own behavior, especially when you think you're right. And of course, in this case, Jesus was right, because what happened was, in one conversation with one woman, an entire community believed. Because he took the time to have the hard conversation with that one woman at the well, an entire community came to follow Jesus. The disciples didn't get it, but he didn't give up on them either. He tried to explain to them, the harvest is plentiful, it's happening right now, watch what I am doing. I'm taking the time with this one woman, but it's about to manifest itself in multitudes, because this whole town is about to know who I am, and they're about to put their faith in me. By engaging in one relationship, a whole community was changed. When we do those hard things, because we can do hard things, transformation happens. As we begin this Lent, the challenge is to meet someone new. And that's hard. It can be really hard to think about going out and finding someone new, but if we look at Jesus as our example, what would it look like if we found that one person and engaged in a conversation? Whether it's the cashier at Walmart, maybe it's the person who works at the gas station, maybe it's your server at a restaurant, maybe it's your neighbor that you haven't spoken with or don't easily speak with. What would it look like if you took the time to walk across those barriers like Jesus did with the Samaritan woman and began to have conversations? What would it look like if you sat down with the people in your life who are going through a hard time, who are spiraling in a bad way, and you said, you know what, I'm not okay with this, but I want you to know that I love you, even through it. What can we do? What would it take to have the courage to have that kind of hard conversation, or the kind of hard conversation about our faith that might even cause us to question our own faith? Can we do it? Can we risk it? Do we have the courage to do that hard thing? What would it look like to have a hard conversation with a person who doesn't understand why we do what we do, whether it's volunteering at Ruth's house, or whether it's starting a church in St. Paul, or a church across town, or going on a mission trip? We're often most critical of one another and wanting to keep up appearances of how we think a Christian or a Christ follower should act or behave. What would it look like if we engaged in those hard conversations with one another and encouraged one another so that we might see the fruit of the labor, that we might reap the rewards of the harvest? This week, Sean Moore is coming to speak on Wednesday. And I think he has had lots of hard conversations. The church he's planting is in St. Paul, but he's intentionally planting a multicultural church that reflects the neighborhood where he lives, that reflects the family that he is a part of, with the intent of growing the kingdom of God in a more reconciled and healthy way that reflects where he is, that breaks down those barriers and has hard conversations about living on this block versus this block, and this part of the neighborhood versus this part of the neighborhood. I think he will challenge us in those hard conversations. This Lent, I want to challenge you to do the hard thing, to meet someone new, so that as a community we might experience transformation. One person at a time, one conversation at a time, one relationship at a time. The whole community can be changed as a result. Together we become more useful, more refined, and more beautiful when we do that hard thing and talk to one another. As we gather at the Lord's table today, it is a reminder of the hardest conversation that Jesus ever had and continues to have with us. As we consider what it was when he sat down with his disciples and tried to explain to them that soon and very soon, he took the bread and he held it and he said, "This is my body, which is broken for you. Eat in remembrance of me." And he took the cup and he held it up and he said, "This is the new covenant of my blood. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he returns. Each of you drink." And then he commanded us to keep doing this. And when we gather here, month after month, with this bread and this cup, we are committing to one another to do the work to which we are called, which is to have those hard conversations with one another and in our community, so that our world might be transformed because we follow Jesus, because of the faith we have in our God. This is our reminder. And we take it with us and in us, and it goes out with us from this place. and it encourages us and inspires us to carry Jesus into every conversation, into every interaction with every person that we meet along the way. So in a moment, I'm going to invite you to come and to share in the Lord's table. I'm going to pray before we begin. Gracious and holy God, we give thanks for this day. We give thanks for this table. We give thanks for both the commitment to our faith, but also for the inspiration and the calling to go out. We pray that as we take this bread and take this cup, we are reminded of your work and that we might continue it in our own lives. It is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I'm going to invite our ushers to come forward, and they will dismiss you to come forward to receive the elements.